What's really freaking cool about being the craftsperson on the roof, the craftsman on the roof? Well, it's very satisfying, right? It's satisfying to be up there and see materials going on and to be competent with your hands.
Yeah, I think, so much of it is just transactional, right? I have this contract
Yeah.
for 40,000 bucks. Um, I need to buy the materials for 15,000 and I want to pay a subcontractor, 12,000. That gets me, now I have my profit margin. Boom, transaction done. I don't really care about that subcrew, right?
Hey, how's it going? It's Tim Brown, and this is the Hook Better Leads podcast. And today I have the pleasure of having on Isaac Smith. What's the name of your company again, Isaac?
I work for a company called the Contracting Company.
Awesome. And we're talking about honoring craftsmanship in roofing again. Has it been honored before? Really? Like, do you feel like this is a new problem, or do you feel like craftsmanship has never been really fully honored in roofing?
I would say, in my experience, craftsmanship and trades in the construction industry in America is a commodity. Um, you know, and I don't, no, I don't think that it's really honored in a way that, I would see it as the capability of, or to me, trades is an art, and that might be somebody's art form, right? And that I don't think
Yeah.
it is or has been honored in that way.
What's the real problem from your point of view that we're talking about today that made you want to get on the podcast?
Um, yeah, so we see in the roofing industry, in the construction industry, all the glory that I see is about the business owner that made, $100 million or whatever, or the sales rep that went out and, he really killed it and he signed, 50 contracts um in the last 2 weeks, or somebody's profit margin is, they're killing it. Their profit margin is 50% average for the last 6 months. But there's really zero talk about the trade and whether the trade,
Yeah.
as far as the homeowner and the roofer is concerned, as long as it looks okay from the curb and it don't leak, that's all that matters.
Yeah. So that's why I think that's why there's not as much talk about it is because like this, like it's a good roof.
Right,
You know what I mean? Like I think like down to the very detail. And I know that you're involved with more like metal work,
right.
like metal roofs and stuff like that. And I think that there's a lot more beauty to that. And I think that I could see craftsmanship. It always matters, okay? It always matters. I know it always matters, but like to the broader public, and maybe there could be a little bit more fanfare around metal or specialty products in general because they're just a little bit more aesthetic. And they're more expensive, so they better look better. They better look good, right?
Right.
So, how would we ever make that shift? I guess to really respect, because I ultimately like I pride ourselves. Like if I'm talking to a new employee at Hook and I'm like, we're serving the roofing industry and what we're really trying to do is like elevate the trades long term. If I'm getting high and mighty with it, our point is to elevate the way the trades looks in the world and specifically roofing. And we do that through websites and marketing and stuff like that. But like ultimately long term, like I want to give to things that make it more likely that kids from high school go into the trades. And when I really think about it, it's like I don't really hang out with people that are putting nails in roofs all day. I'm hanging out with a lot of sales guys and stuff like that. So there is a disconnect there for me personally that I don't know why, but I don't get to hang out with those people as much. Or I guess maybe I'm maybe not making a concerted effort to do it to understand the deep parts of the trade as much. How do we how do we kind of get over this? Like it feels like what you're saying is we're not honoring those people as much. So how do we honor those people more?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of dynamics that go into that. I think culturally, the entire culture, the society at large is pushing people, anyhow in the past. I think things are kind of everything is kind of in that what do we do now, right? We see that all around us. But for sure, leading up to where we are, go get a college degree, run a business, make millions of dollars, get that American dream. And I think everybody's kind of seeing like, yeah, that's kind of an empty thing now. Um,
Hmm.
and I think there's just a dynamic shift that needs to happen that where there's the society at large gives more of a respect to tradesmen. They don't need to become this business owner to be a respected member of society.
But let's say if I'm like advising my niece or nephew to getting into the roofing industry, I'll be real with you. I'd probably, well, I'd advise being a roof. I think like as a teenager and up through like 20s, being an actual like. But then I kind of would. I'm just being honest, and you can get mad at me if you want, but I'd be like, and then move into sales because it's very lucrative and that's good for your family, and you'll be more like, I mean, like you can feed them and feed them better
No,
if you're in
I
sales.
agree with you. I mean, like thinking about my children, I want them to be very well educated. I want them to really know what they want to do, whatever that is. I'm not going
Yeah,
to force my son to go into roofing. Um, and I would
yeah,
want him to be, very well educated and have the ability to run his own business for sure. Now let's look at the flip side. Like let's look at a sports team, right? Let's kind of do an analogy on a sports team.
yeah.
You know, a sports team is built around that MVP, and
Hmm.
you know it needs that glory going to that player, the one that actually plays the game. Um,
Yeah,
how is that
that's
possible
good.
in the roofing industry? I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's pretend that we could figure something out in this conversation and kind of chew through a few ideas and maybe challenge ourselves a bit. Well, what's really freaking cool about being the craftsperson on the roof, the craftsman on the roof? Well, it's very satisfying, right? It's satisfying to be up there and see materials going on and to be competent with your hands. It's in fact, in a lot of ways, in other ways, it's more stressful, but in some ways it's less stressful. It's more satisfying because you're completing something and it's done, and it's like, what do they say? Dirty hands, clean money.
Right.
So if that in that aspect of it, it's very satisfying, and I think that that is something to kind of prize. I think one of the challenges here that we're getting at too, and I want to keep on kind of throwing out ideas for possible ways to increase the prized value of this and that sports team mentality with the all star on the team. And by the way, I will say some of the roofing companies that I hang out with and work with, they do have, it tends to be a little bit more on that maintenance or that service department leader, because they get in there and they get something done, and if let's say they get a call back, or let's say they have a leak, like there is a lot of like love for that person in the organization, usually the guy who gets stuff done, right, the guy who makes it happen, the guy who fixes the problem. So there's love in these organizations for that person. It might not always be the most lucrative thing. I think there's also a little bit of I mean, the service department leader can obviously get paid pretty well, but there's there's a little bit of the problem with the subcontractors. A lot of it's hard to pay the best, you know, nail gun guy, craftsman the most when they're on the subcontracting team. Sometimes they're like there's love for the crews, hey, my best crews, and then sometimes people get really in with their crews, but in a lot of areas in the United States, there's a lot of incentives to have subcontractors, not to have these guys in house. And so that's one of the disconnects I think that roofing has in particular with crafts. craftsmen, craftspeople.
Contractors love the catch-all because it makes every single one of their roof builds easier and more profitable. Protective netting wraps facade and landscaping to prevent from left-behind nails and damage. Homeowner referrals bring you more jobs, and insurance supplements bring you more profits. But my favorite part, the branding.
Yeah, I think, so much of it is just transactional, right? I have this contract
Yeah.
for 40,000 bucks. Um, I need to buy the materials for 15,000 and I want to pay a subcontractor, 12,000. That gets me, now I have my profit margin. Boom, transaction done. I don't really care about that subcrew, right? As long as they have it done in a way that's, don't leak and the client is happy, boom, transaction is completed. So I think that kind of brings us to a question of, employment. How's our company structured? I think the general contractor subcontractor relationship kind of naturally pushes everything to purely transactional.
Mm.
Whereas,
So you think ultimately for this to fix itself, ideally there would be more people who employ the craftsmen and employ the labor.
I do because I think really to just like in the sports field, in any arena to have an extremely successful player, there's so many layers of things that go into supporting that player, right?
Mhm.
Or let's talk about, an airplane pilot, a really awesome airplane pilot. Man, there's so many layers of things that go into supporting that pilot. It's not just him flying the joysticks on the airplane. Like there's a support team, there's a mechanic team, there's, you know, air support, there's hundreds and hundreds of people that are going into supporting that massively important player. And when you have the contractor subcontractor type relationship, it's really fractured up, and I don't really feel like it works that way.
Isaac, do you do a lot does your company do a lot of subcontracting work?
So the way we are set up right now is I have three crews that are 1099 subcontractors that work for me. I trained them, all of them, and they
Yep.
mostly work for me. But I
Yeah, so I guess my kind of like thing with that is like it's almost like the incentives are such that it makes sense for most of us in the roofing industry to do 1099. You know what I
right,
mean? Like it's like the laws, the liabilities. There's just so many reasons to do it this way, and even lawyers. Wait, I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, but like so many, I've heard it from lawyers that that's like makes sense for like liability's sake. And so that I think that that's one of the other tough parts about it. But I like your mode of like you're working more closely with them and ensuring quality and kind of you're training them.
right.
So that's beautiful. I mean, I think that ultimately guys like you help this get more like honor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
So you can talk to me a little bit more about that.
so yeah, I mean the whole 1099 versus W2 conversation, I think it's a tough conversation because there's so many, like you said, there's laws and implications and liability that are a lot easier to manage with a 1099 relationship um versus a W2 relationship.
And I will say that kind of goes down to the craft, if you think about it. That because you're really you're really supposedly not supposed to be able to manage certain aspects. You can create quality standards. From what I understand, you can create quality standards for them,
Right.
but down to the like, if you were to try to micromanage anything with a 1099, you're essentially like starting to make it not a 1099. So I'm kind of mad at the laws in this situation, like in the way the incentives are, because I think if that was dismantled, like let's say the law implications weren't there, I think this could be a lot simpler, and I think also roofers would probably prefer to have a little bit more control over their crews.
Yes.
to be
So
honest with you.
basically, as a, my subcontractor crew, all I can really do, I can bring them into my shop, I can train them, right, and show them how it should be done. After that, I can't go out on the job site and babysit them and say, do it this, and this way. I can basically say at the end of the job, I accept that or I don't.
So like you can say that was done really, really well, and you are like the Michael Jordan of our team, and you could throw them on your shoulders and throw a party for them. I mean, you have opportunity as an individual to really like honor and elevate craftsmen, and I think every roofing company owner could and can, and I think that I almost feel like that's what you're asking for in a way is like just more honor and like kind of like whatever that means to you as a roofing business owner, like you're kind of calling people to action to let's honor some of these guys that are really doing the work and are really freaking good at it.
If you truly believe in what you're doing and you want to be the best version of yourself and you want to build a great organization, there's no other place to do that besides the Roofing Academy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that, you know, employment is really a difficult situation. How do we attract people to do just menial labor?
Mm,
That's just it's a
yeah,
commodity to me. Come over here, work your behind off, and make me money, right?
yeah.
Versus, um, if we approach it from the honorable trades honorable trades side of it, I think that that could be a lot more attractive.
So if you look at the way that the roofing landscape that's visible online is, we can talk for a second that there's honoring all these CEOs and salespeople, like you mentioned. We're honoring them, but we don't see very many craftsmen of the bunch unless there are CEOs that came from the craft, which I think is pretty beautiful. I like that. That's cool. Um, so in that way, I think part of that naturally happens. If we talk about the problem for a second, if it's a problem, you know, that it happens because there's not a ton of incentive for a craftsman to put himself out there on the
Right.
internet. Like, it's kind of, I'll be real with you, I don't want to, dude. Like, people sometimes like look at me like they're like, that guy, well, he really loves the spotlight. And I'm like, I do not care. I literally, it's embarrassing. Just like every time, like if you listen to your voice on a podcast, Isaac, you're probably gonna be like, oh, my voice is weird. Like,
Definitely.
I cringe on a lot of this stuff that I see of myself. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's because it gets a business result. And for a craftsman, and there are other crafts, like let's say carpentry, like YouTube is flush with like carpenters and like various crafts. YouTube is a little bit different. There's a little bit more like craftsman vibe there. Facebook, where you and I kind of met, or like one of the places that we bump back and forth on, is kind of flush with people that are kind of doing biz dev.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even the roofing CEOs don't have a big incentive to put themselves out there unless they're selling something else besides
Right.
roofs. For a lot, they're selling to roofing people or whatever.
Hmm.
For us to see them and interact with them, a lot of times they are. And so that's the hard part is like there's not a ton of incentive for craftspeople to get visible on the internet sometimes. Maybe YouTube.
Yeah. So I think if we look at some of the other trades, say logging, for instance, or different trades like that, they have competitions. Like competitions
That's cool.
held at their
Yeah.
fairgrounds or something. And I
Yep.
think that's one way that
So shingler, like asphalt metal, there is competitions around like the fastest shingler competitions. Those are kind of cool.
mhm,
A little bit more in Canada for some reason. I think like Canadian roofers seem to be like a little bit more craft focused. Have you noticed that? Have you kind of like looked up like for instance, Best Damn Roofer is influencer in roofing and he's around, but he's like he's he's a good roofer.
Right.
Like he's like he does these diamond metal shingles that
Right.
are like beautiful, and then he's like does like finished roofs, and he's like fixing other people's work. And then all the influencers from Canada that are in roofing, influencers, like we say that in a derogatory way, but all the ones in roofing in Canada are real
Right.
roofers.
Right.
Like it's kind of crazy how it's a little different. Like I don't know why that's so different in Canada than the United
Yeah.
States.
I mean, I can in my mind I can think of like one Washington Roofing. I'm sure you probably see his stuff. Maybe not.
I don't know if I have.
He does asphalt roofing, and he's like the best in the country. He's
Yeah,
from out west, but he's really present, and he's on the roof every day.
I love that. That's fun. I mean, maybe that's part of the solution here because we talk shit about influencers. You know, like I get it. Facebook always talks shit about influencers for some reason. Because I'm an aspiring one, I sometimes take offense, but I shouldn't because I'm not really yet. But maybe what we just need to do is like elevate these Canadian roofers that are all actually roofing more, like because just the ones that are doing the work, just like kind of push them because that's usually the thing. Like if we're looking for a solution, sometimes there's one already there a little bit, and we just need to push on the solution that's already coming. You know what I mean? Like and be part of it. So I would say that's one. Like we should elevate some more of those like roofing actually roofing influencers. We could call them actually roofing influencers.
Yeah. So if I'm gonna get derogatory and influencers, it's on people that just do stupid stuff just for clout, right? And they really bring no
Yeah.
benefit to humanity. I think that's a waste of time,
Yeah.
right?
What would you say? I'm wondering if I'm in this group. So what would you consider stupid stuff for clout?
um, you know, some of the things that come to my mind is like, but they're kind of fun in a way, but like how ridiculous. Um, I think, it's arguable. Is the stuff they do actually beneficial to humanity? Who's another one? You know,
I can't get it on my skull. I was trying to get these glasses on my skull, but
um,
what do you mean? Like you're saying like
do you know who How Ridiculous is?
no, who's
Okay.
that?
It's just a group of young boys that they just they get together and they just smash stuff and they do like ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
They throw balls
Yeah, I used to do
off of dams and
Yeah, I used to do stuff like that when I was a teenager too, so I can't really like call it too much, but I think there is a spot like in all of us, like anyone that has some attention or is trying to get attention kind of notices like there's like a visual and physical aspect to the stuff that gets attention, and it's sometimes ridiculous stuff. So that's where it kind of like sometimes goes in a negative direction, you know what I mean? Like cuz blowing something up, for instance, you know what I mean? Or
yeah,
push, you know what? I always watch those videos where the people push on the chimney. They're like trying to push the chimney and then it like just goes through the roof. So,
yeah. I mean, if
right.
it's if all content was like functional, it'd be boring as dirt, right? It'd be
Yes. Yeah.
terribly boring. So, Whistling Diesel, I don't know if you ever see him or not.
I have not. I got to follow all these people though. I'm going
He's crazy.
to recheck this
He's a
out and follow.
country boy from Indiana. He now lives in Tennessee, and he takes vehicles and trucks and just finds every kind of creative way to smash them to blithereens.
That sounds super
Yeah,
fun. I'm
it's
not going to
it's
lie.
funny, like you know. So
Yeah.
as long as you're using your content to benefit humanity, as long as your content isn't, some people create content that I think is directly harmful to humanity.
Like, give me an example of that. Can you try to give me an example of that? Because I'm curious.
So
Because,
people like, they go onto college campuses and they ask people, like intrusive questions about their personal life and their,
oh,
I
okay.
think
Yeah.
that's just
Sure.
stupid, right? I think that's harmful to
Yeah, I
relationships.
agree with that. And I would say almost like super divisive stuff can be that way too. Like I think roofing community as I see it, I'm gonna just throw this out there. It's hard to address this without seeming negative, but like roofing community in general loves to just throw shade two things: throwing shade, being negative, saying negative stuff, and it gets a lot of attention. Everyone piles in because they're like, not me though, you know, like, haha, I'm good. And the other one is vague posting. I'm just gonna call it vague posting because they like say it like it's kind of negative, but you don't know who it's about, and then everyone's like, nah, it's not about me. So negative and vague posting are my two least favorite parts about like roofing social media as I see it. All right. Well, I feel like we covered this topic and we can easily come back to it. But my podcasts usually aren't that long, so I'm gonna help wrap this up, and then we'll come back to it if we need to. Um, I appreciate you chatting about this. I agree that we
Awesome.
should be honoring roofing more, the actual trade. I appreciate you taking the time, everyone. Isaac Smith, how can they check you out on the internet?
Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Isaac Smith.
Awesome. And the podcast is put on by Hook Agency, hookagency.com. And appreciate everyone for joining.
Thank you, Tim.